Calvin.
You won't believe this. I was getting ready to call you.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I had your name pulled up and everything.
Oh, did you guys know they sold superchargers here? Oh, look at all the goodies. There's not a whole lot of fanfare about unboxing this supercharger because it is the hot rod kit. It literally comes with this and this, which are the instructions on how to install these bolts using this Loctite for a pulley that is not included. Also, you get these intake bolts, which there's 10 of them here, which is all you need. For some reason, that one has a piece of wire loom on it. And then randomly, one more thrown in there, which makes 11. On the back, it shows it that they've pressure tested this intercooler system. So you got your inlet and your outlet. Here's a little tube right here you can hook up for a mechanical boost gauge if you so desire. It does have the fuel rails on it that are a 6 ORB. Looks like they put a little silicone in here where your injectors have to go. This side, see, it has a Bosch 3-bar map sensor already installed. Here's your intake air temp sensors already installed as well. This vacuum setup is for the bypass. So if you're at idle, you're gonna want that to be able to open so you can get air into your engine and not have to pull it through the rotors. It just helps with efficiency. You got 3 other large ports here, look all like 3/8 for vacuum. So if you've got a bunch of stuff going on that you need vacuum for, which like for us, it may be the brakes. And I don't know, I guess if you've got a catch can system or active catch can, you can run it like that. Ours does not. We've just got our Motion Raceworks here ran to those Brian Tooley valve covers. We're gonna need a whole bunch of parts to make this work, and you might too. I mean, specifically, like, they didn't bother machining those surfaces off the supercharger, so I'm assuming that was so you'd have to buy their intake gaskets, even though the instructions say use the intake gaskets for your cylinder heads. Not so sure about that. I'm gonna go ahead and replace our fuel pump with this Dietz Work 420 liter per hour. It's an intake, kind of a factory replacement style unit. It does come with all the goodies too, which is really nice. I appreciate those guys doing a good job packaging that up, and it's very inexpensive. We've got a 155 liter per hour in it now. I think that should be a really easy swap out. So if we have any trouble starting our engine up with the supercharger on it, that's one gremlin we won't need to chase. You know, to me, it's not that hard to lift your bed up. You take a few bolts and unplug your wiring and your gas filler, and then you can get to the top of your fuel tank. I've seen guys cut holes in the bed. I just don't understand that whatsoever. Here's our factory sender assembly for an OBS. We did, of course, upgrade it with this 155 Walbro pump back in the day. This is gonna be a super straightforward, just plug and play replacement since we've already wired that connector in. Well, that's put back in before I get too excited about putting everything back together and snugging down that O-ring clip or whatever that holds that thing in. Let's check it. All right, step 1 done. Next prerequisite is gonna be this crank pinning kit. Through it. Essentially on an LS engine, the crank pulley is just pressed on, so it's a friction fit. Well, to run normal accessories, that's gonna be just fine, but if you've got some real force against it like a supercharger, you're gonna have to have some way of keeping that crank pulley from spinning. The way this kit works is you remove your crank pulley bolt, you put this in its place and run that in tight. They provide the drill bit where you can drill for a couple of these little dowels, and that'll keep it from turning on the crankshaft. Because the LSs are internally balanced, they just need a pulley on the outside, and it didn't need to be keyed because clocking it's not important. Whereas the old school engines were externally balanced by a harmonic balancer. So the keyway was a way to keep that thing clocked properly so it did its job as far as eliminating unbalanced crankshafts. Here's a little pro tip to know when you're finished drilling. I marked the depth of that fixture with this piece of soapstone. And so this is the depth of the dowels. And I'll put a little piece of tape or something up here to let me know when I can stop. I like to use a lot of WD-40. It's kind of like a lube and a coolant for drilling. You get those all drilled and the dowel pins will actually just slide right in. You don't have to hammer them or anything. And your crank balancer bolt or crank pulley bolt, we established that, will keep them from backing out. And as you can see, this will keep that from spinning on the crankshaft. Because this supercharger has this 45-degree snout angle, that would put the air intake towards where the battery was. And it's just complicated. I didn't want to run an air intake tube back and around and over to this side. Also didn't want to relocate the battery to the driver's side because I'd much rather have that weight in the back of the truck. So follow along because I did some mathing. The battery and the tray weighs 47.2 pounds. This intake with the throttle body on it weighs 24.4 pounds, which is giving us a total of 71.6 pounds. Then I weighed the supercharger with the throttle body on top just to try to keep it a fair comparison, and it weighed 68.4 pounds. We basically ended up with a 3.2 pound surplus to work with up here. So whatever the intercooler setup weighs, I'll just take 3.2 pounds from that, and that'll give us the net weight we added to the front end of the truck, which I think is gonna be negligible, to be honest. I've got the harness all removed from that Holley Stealth system because again, we're gonna have to replace all that. Got our coolant tank out of the way, making some space so we can get some work done. Also got rid of the nitrous solenoid and fuel setup, so now we just have what we need to supply our multi-port intake. The guys at ICT Billet, they assured me to put this supercharger on. All I needed to do was switch the mount bracket for the AC, which pretty excited about. So I'm gonna just go ahead and give a little plug in here for those guys. I have put like full accessory drives, like 8 rib stuff on a couple of those trucks on the wall there. And like that one and that one. Anyway, if I would have done this to those, that would have been like $2,500 wasted. Whereas ICT Billet guys, it's really a modular setup that they have. So if you ever make any changes, you can just replace the brackets for the specific accessory. And I said this in other videos, I love the fact that it doesn't bolt to the water pump like the Holley mid-mount. So if you need to replace a water pump like we have, you just take the water pump off and the rest of this stuff can stay bolted in place. So the kit we use, which those guys are sharp and they kind of make them universal for whatever spacing with the same kit. That's the part number to go with LSA and with these Sandon compressors. Got it all installed. And they kind of have you an option here of how you want to run where this pulley is with the grooves versus smooth. So we should be in good shape. I like the idea of like the back side of the belt, then around the supercharger pulley gives it plenty of wrap. Back side of the belt, then groove, back side of the belt on the tensioner down to the crank. So I like it. Also like that I didn't have to build new lines. I probably could use a 90 here instead of a 45 now that this has been moved over a little bit more. Also, remember back like 40 seconds ago whenever I said you could always just take your water pump off without unbolting a bunch of stuff? Well, that's not true anymore. This bolt and this bolt actually fasten to the ears of that water pump. Say la vie. No job's really complete until you make a trip to Lowe's or Home Depot. Now, ICT does sell a bolt kit, the 90 millimeter length that's specific for putting that supercharger on cathedral port heads with their spacers. But they didn't sell me any. Looking at you, Calvin. Luckily, Home Depot had them for more money than it would have cost me to buy them from ICT Billet. But it's the weekend and I want to work on it, and I can have the bolts, so I got them. Magnuson's pretty clear about needing all the space they can underneath that supercharger. Matter of fact, if you have a factory valley cover, the instructions show a place you're supposed to grind it down a little bit. I'm hoping that these spacers will raise that thing up enough that I can still use this coolant system, because it is, I think this is from ICT Billet as well. It's really nice having this flexible line to give you a little flexibility. Those heads look so good. There's O-rings they ship you with the back of these. So I'm gonna put a little lubricant that I wanna say was for swimming pool O-rings and stuff. But anyway, I'm gonna put that on these as well as the gaskets on the supercharger. So when we get that heavy thing set on there, if we have to move it around at all to line it up to get the bolts in, we're not gonna be tearing up any of our soft sealing materials. These gaskets don't fit worth a crap. I guess the idea is that they'll clip on so you don't have to deal with them when you're installing it, but this little brace right here sticks out way too far and makes contact with the casting before these can make contact with the surface area, which sucks because it's not like they gave them away or that they even came with it. Looks like it's gonna fit under the hood, even though at first glance you wouldn't think it would. Also, it does appear that we've got room under here for our steam vents. So sort of a milestone in this install, I would guess. All right, so the bolts are now torqued 108 inch-pounds, which my math said 9 foot-pounds. Not very much if you think about it, to be holding all this down and together, but guess we'll see what happens. Now it's time for fuel injectors, which we ordered from Dietzworks. These are 90 pounds per hour LS3 style injectors. The Magnuson does come with these little spacers in between the supercharger and the mount tabs for these fuel rails. So be mindful of that when you go to take them off. Those things can fall out and you don't want to have to be looking for them. Not that I know anything about that. These LS3 height injectors bolt down nice without those spacers in place. The throttle cable, I went ahead and bought their 48-inch length one. They offer a 36 also from Motion Raceworks. But technically they are still adjustable. So if you're unsure of your length, probably do what I did and get the 48-inch. These little bits right here will actually unthread from the nylon outer sleeve, but I only suggest you do that for one side. So this will be like hooked to the throttle body. And on this end, it'll hook to my GM pedal. So I can loosen these two set screws and slide this off of the cable and then slide these off this again. It just was threaded on here. So I can remove it, get this stuff out of the way. Now I've got plenty of length to work with so I can mock it up on the throttle body, which I just finished installing. And this is their bracket that you can get as an option with this throttle body. Also the straight ahead fitting here, 4-inch, like just regular hose barb style. That comes standard with these throttle bodies, but the nice thing is if you don't want that, you don't necessarily have to pay for it. You can get a 90-degree or a split for turbo stuff. Anyway, their motion stuff is pretty nice. Does not ship with TPS or idle air control motor. I suggest you get that kit from Holly. So that's something you reach out to Jeff at 918 Motorsports and he'll take care of. So after mocking up the sleeve the way I wanted it, I cut it off right there at this edge of the firewall. Put that nice black washer behind there because the hole is a little larger than what this little bung or whatever that comes with the Motion Raceworks cable. On the inside, actually, it's a really nice fitment for GM pedal here too. You put a nut on the back side here, and then that threads onto the pedal assembly. And there you go. Then we'll set those little Allen screws or set screws, the tiny little jokers here, and then we'll cut off what we don't need. Pretty straightforward. So let's talk fuel system. Everything is 6AN, which is what these rails came with. We talked about that earlier, 6 ORB. So I just put plugs on both of the front ends of the fuel rails. There's a couple of schools of thought on how to do things. What I'm doing is basically a deadhead unit or a deadhead fuel run, kind of like the late model LS stuff came from the factory. So from our regulator, the fuel first goes over to the back of the driver's side rail, and then it has that T connection that comes over and feeds the back of the passenger side rail. And then again, it's just a deadhead system, and whatever is not used will basically go out of the bottom of that fuel pressure regulator and back to the tank. A lot of times you'll see like a crossover tube on the front, so you'll supply the fuel on one side, run a crossover tube, and then on the exit side, you run that to the regulator, and it just holds the pressure that you need. I think people like that because they believe that it makes sure there's not going to be any air in the system, and it primes it a little easier. But, you know, if GM thinks it's fine to run it just straight deadhead, then I do too. And it just simplifies things because of the distance of all this bulk between these two. I'd have to run like a straight line and then bring it all the way around the front and stick it all the way in the back. I don't understand why I would want to do that when this looks nice and clean. So I have gone ahead and plugged in my fuel injectors and put in my coil harnesses on both sides. All that I really lack is the throttle position sensor and the idle air control motor. And then I can, this wiring's just laying off to the side, I can get that routed. Of course, you've got a coolant temp sensor, your alternator's got the exciter wire, and then it's power output. Let's see, yeah, the map sensor goes on the back now, and the manifold air temp, they give you so much slack. We're gonna have to probably modify this harness from Holley to shorten a bunch of stuff to get the right lengths that we need so it'll be clean. But I think it's always a better idea to get it started and verify everything works before you start cutting up a harness that you may have to send back, or I don't know, worst case scenarios. We've got a few next steps left to do. One of them is the pulley. So this is the 3.9 inch pulley that ICT Billet sold us. According to Magnuson, this will make 6 PSI. Now, my buddy Wes, who you may remember that really pretty blue square body we did suspension work on, he had these laying around. This is a 3.3 and this is a 3 point nothing. So probably call that a party pulley. There's quite a bit of difference between these, even though numerically it seems pretty small. We're probably gonna run this 3.3 for now. The goal is to hit right around 10 PSI. I think that'll be a super happy number. This motor is built, it's forged, it's got the rings gapped for boost or nitrous, so it's made to beat on. If you were running a stock engine, I would really recommend just using that 3.9 and keeping it at 6 PSI. I know a lot of people say, no, I ran 8 PSI on mine or more. Okay, cool. But if you want one to last, at 6 pounds is, I think that's the right number on a stock engine. 918 Motorsports came through with this MSD part number 2942. It's got the throttle position sensor and an idle air control motor all in one nice kit. This is an adapter, I think I got this on Amazon, that goes for the manifold air temp sensor. Or no, maybe it's the map sensor. Had to get that because mine doesn't plug right into the Bosch that the Magnuson came with. I bought these are for Dorman Help Center. That's for that throttle cable. I noticed whenever I push on it, it just pulls through those little set screws, and I don't want that to happen. I want to make sure I get full throttle. Last thing I've got on the bench, we're gonna, I mentioned earlier, relocate the battery to the back, so I'll just go over a few of these parts. This is, all of this is eBay stuff, to be honest with you. So if you just search like Optima battery mount, you'll get a dozen of these show up. This thing was under 40 bucks. Billet mount with tie downs for front and back. It comes with the hardware to bolt it down and the nuts for the bottom side of it. So that's gonna be all we really need. Now, if you're hanging the battery sideways or upside down, you probably want a fully caged battery tray. But since ours is just gonna be sitting upright and back there in the bed, this should be sufficient. I've got a Stinger brand splitter for our power supply when it gets up to the truck. Probably run the one from the battery here and then the one that goes to the starter right there next to it, that heavier gauge stuff. Everything else will feed out of the top. This is a ground splitter. Towards the front of the truck, you're gonna need to have stuff for your grounds where the battery used to be. So that'll come from the chassis, and then up top here, we can feed several grounds even in the same hole. And then instead of that weird fuse thing, I didn't love that plastic holder for the fuse that we were running on our amp power supply. We're gonna put this circuit breaker in here, and these are really nice that in case you just trip it, just flick it back on. This little tool, basically it's a little hammer slammer job, so we're gonna be putting those ends on that big cable, and you just kind of drop it in there and hit that with the hammer to attach it. So I guess the next thing, oh, by the way, this is a 1-AUG welding cable. Get it from a local welding supply. It's a little cheaper than buying like automotive branded stuff, but it's actually probably better. It's got a nice flexibility to it because it has finer strands in there, and that is always good. You should put these on before you put the pulley in your way. And here's what I hope is the finished product for the wiring. I've got the power going to the fan assembly. This is directly to the Holly, which they want running right to the battery. This, of course, the stereo amplifier cable with that circuit breaker. This is the big power that comes from the battery in the back. I've got split loom on it. And then there's their power output that'll go to the starter. This is the charge line that comes, actually, come from the alternator, and then they usually tie it up here, and then from there they'll run a line. So that'll send the voltage back to the battery and allow everything to operate off of it. Here's the ground, goes right to the frame. And then let's see, we've got a ground for the fans. We've got a ground for the Holly, and then there's a big ground for the vintage air kit. Because they want that to go right to the battery also. I think the supply line ties up there on that vintage air stuff on that strip that comes from the alternator. So this should take care of everything. It's definitely looks pretty simple by cleaning it up with split loom and some hockey tape. So we should be set there so I can get an air intake and do like a little bend and drop it in this cavity. I actually did trim down the battery. See if you can see it. This is part of the factory battery tray that this dryer is mounted to. So it plugs a couple of the holes in this wheel well. Plugged one of the holes here also because of the strap to hold that cable sturdy. So we shouldn't have a bunch of rainwater and stuff spraying in here because the battery tray is no longer here and left openings. I realize you guys may want to see how these cables go together. Basically, stick it in one of those lugs and put it that fixture somewhere solid, like on a concrete floor, and smack that thing a couple of times. Then you can slide that heat shrink tubing over there, and I just hit it with MAP gas or a little propane or butane tank or something like that. And when you're finished, you'll end up with something that looks really nice, like that right there. Now, I am certainly no tuner by any stretch of the imagination, but I kind of know enough to be dangerous. Again, this is just a modified map that was used to dyno tune it on the throttle body, that I just changed it to make it fit this stuff. So we'll see if that's all happy. The fuel pressure does look like it's in the mid-50s right now, so until it's running, I won't be able to make any adjustments. Maybe you wizards can tell me more than I know about it. It acted like it had weird ignition issues, so what I've done is gone into the wizard and just created a brand new global file. Just giving it the basic specs of what we have. Went in and had to make these changes because of us running this 58X crank and then a 1X single pulse cam. So I had to go in and do basically custom ignition instead of your standard 58X. Configuring that with this coil on plug, and this is the millisecond of dwell time that is advertised in the coil packs that we have. Just had to make those changes, and then in the let's see, here on the fuel injectors, because I chose custom injectors, it just wanted me to fill in the data that I was able to get from DeetsWorks. So we should be in a little better shape this go round. All right, let's see what happens. guys can't imagine how good it feels to just hear the thing start up. It's been a few weeks since we tore it down, and it's always comforting. You're being honest with yourself, that's why you came here. I know this video is running long now. I've got to do the intercooler setup still, tidy up some of the wiring. I've got an air intake here that we're gonna see if it fits. It was pretty inexpensive Amazon job actually. So we'll do some neat and tidy up in the next video, as well as probably do the tuning and probably even the dyno tuning. That way you got a lot of payoff on that one. But there it is. It's a good looking unit, to be honest with you, and it does clear the hood. I'll probably get asked, but this is the OBS clamshell style mounts with just the plates from ICT billet to mount them to this engine. So if you're curious to what mounts this thing was able to clear the hood, now you know. Also, the belt, after trying multiples, was this guy. It's advertised as 127 inch, but I don't really think it is. I bet it's 126 and a half if you put a tape on it. So anyway, that's what we did. Appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you in the next one.